Hello folks, and welcome to the Dev Blog. Today we're going to look at some of the Blightsouls and Sorrowkeepers that wander the Swamp of Souls. While I tell you about some of them, I'm going to share a few different art approaches as we go. I'll also share the creatures' stat blocks so you can try them out in your own adventures if you like. Let's look at a couple of Blightsouls first of all. I've touched on other Blightsouls before in episode 5 of the series and also in the free adventure found in episode 15. The first one we're going to look at is one of the minor constructs known as Blight Cats. Here I'm starting off with a rough concept just to give me a general idea of what they're going to look like. And while I sketch this out, let me tell you what a Blightsoul is. A Blightsoul is a primitive construct infused with a tortured, trapped spirit contained in a soul jar, and that brings it to life. Blightsouls can take many forms, from like small feral bundles of sticks and skulls, to huge towering monoliths that are powered by the souls of fallen gods. They have been built by a corrupted tribe of lizardmen known as the Redtails, who live deep in the black heart of the old swamp. Dark rituals are performed to bind the raging spirit to the crudely made construct. Blightsouls generally roam the old swamp, acting as guardians to the Redtails and their prophet. For the most part, they are left to their own devices, sowing chaos and discourse throughout the swamp, spreading misery as they wander, the tortured, crazed spirit leaving despair in its wake. Blightsouls can be quite diverse, with their own motivations and goals, depending on what the mad spirit was back in its mortal life. Their abilities and attacks are also unique to the construct, depending on how it was built and what dark rituals brought it to life. So let's drill into the Blight Cat. Now I've figured out a few things that I want to see in its design, and now I'm going to make a rough model of it in Blender. I do this for a couple of reasons. One being that when working in the games industry, it's quite handy to pass a rough model onto the 3D creature artist, just to give a better idea of its proportions and to make sure everything fits and works from your initial 2D design. The other benefit is if I want to paint it in some action shots and poses to flesh out the concept, I've got an accurate model that I can pose. Now I didn't even rig it, I just parented parts to each other so I can move it around into quick poses. You can see I've kept the model pretty simple. I'd rather put the details in my concept and give the creature artist room to work their magic as well. Once I've got a good block out, I'll use the model to set up a scene to really pitch the design. A lot of concept art is really just a cool way to pitch an idea. So don't just do boring side-on sheets, add some flair so people will say, yeah, I want this in the game. And the following painting only took me half an hour once I posed the 3D models, so it really speeds up the process of busting out ideas and angles and poses later on down the track. So on to the Blight Cats. These pack hunters resemble predatory cats, made of wood and bone, lashed together with roughly woven cord. Their heads are made of stitched leather, leaving a gaping hole that acts as a single eye, illuminated by the red light of the soul jar contained within. These souls tend to be of small feral animal spirits, driven mad by the torturous runes etched into the soul jar. Their claws and slashing tail blade are made of roughly sharpened iron, perhaps scavenged from weapons stolen from unlucky adventurers. They live to hunt, killing all sorts of game, wanting to add more lost souls to the corrupted landscape. A pack of Blight Cats range in size from 3 to 12 creatures. And here is the stat block for these vicious little fellas. They're not too tough, pretty lightweight, made out of cord and wood, but they can pounce and stab away with their serrated tails. They are also highly mobile, fast and agile. Next we're going to look at one of the more terrifying Blightsouls, the rolling mass known as TangleFoot, or as Lena calls him, TangleFeet. Lena did the art for this one, and I'll share her process as I tell you about this boss. You'll see her art process is quite different from mine, as she comes from a traditional background, and the result is amazing. I really love this one. And if you want to see more of her work and process, check out her channel, which I'll link in the description below. The TangleFoot. This huge Blightsoul was greatly feared throughout the swamp. It is made of a sprawling mess of briar, bramble and branches that tumble its way along a looping patrol route, destroying everything in its path. It is believed to be getting bigger as it pulls debris into itself and infuses it with the powerful spirit found in its soul jar. Its sprawling mass often traps the spirits of the creatures it has killed. Its many soul-infused branches act like a lethargic spiderweb to the spirits that are crushed in its rolling path. The spirits it traps follow the example of TangleFoot and infuse their power into the clumps of brambles and branches she's gathered up, becoming part of her brood. She often drops these as she rolls along, leaving small feral-like spider constructs in her wake. These scatter throughout the swamp, looking to grow in power by gathering debris and spirits to themselves, perhaps one day becoming the next monstrous TangleFoot, or Tinglefeet. And here's their stat block. He can be very dangerous, potentially paralysing multiple targets while dropping his little broodlings all over the battle map. And though weak, the little constructs can also paralyse their targets. Next up, we're going to look at a SorrowKeeper. Now, SorrowKeepers are different from BlightSouls, and I covered one of them called SorrowKeeper Lish in the free adventure found in episode 14. This time we're going to look at one called Pale Rider, and once again Lena drew this awesome picture. A SorrowKeeper is a ghost elf shaman who has succumbed to the corruption of the swamp. These shamans stayed behind in the old swamp to try and reverse the creeping misery, while their people fled to the young swamp. The shaman ultimately failed, and because of their deep connection to the swamp, became infected and twisted by the corruption. This corruption can affect them in many different ways depending on their former abilities and how they interacted with the swamp. As ancient protectors of the swamp, many now see themselves as guardians of this twisted version of the swamp and will defend this dark land against anything that threatens it. In her former life, the SorrowKeeper known as Pale Rider rode a powerful elk and travelled throughout the swamp protecting its many groves from blight and rot. The elk and her would leave a trail of healing in their wake, noticeable by the many spores and mushrooms that would pop up from the great elk's footprints. Now she is a pale reflection of what she once was. Her elk has absorbed the brunt of the corruption, while the Pale Rider, in her vanity, tries to cling to her immortal beauty. The two creatures are bonded now, rotting into each other and held together by a network of creeping fungus. They cannot be separated. The Pale Rider still wanders throughout the swamp, but now leaves a poisonous trail of ghostly white spores in her wake, causing pestilence to all that cross her path. Instead of healing infected groves, she now speeds up the process of rot and decay, in her own twisted way, thinking she is helping to grow the swamp. The Pale Rider and her corrupted elk act as one creature in combat, and here's the stat block for them. Now they charge around the battlefield, trampling everything in their wake and leaving a trail of spores that can add levels of corruption to all that cross it. And that's 2 new BlightSouls and a SorrowKeeper added to the Swamp of Souls. Hope you enjoyed that episode and the art processes we went through, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks and goodbye.